Okay, so Gavin will deal with the beeps and let everybody in as we go along. We've got quite a large audience this afternoon and I'm really looking forward to this. I am delighted to have bent the arm of Jean Gross and get her to come and talk to you this afternoon. I'm not going to do very much more of an introduction other than Jean wrote one of the books that sits on my bookshelf and then regularly finds its way to my desk where I thumb through it and rip the pages. I'm sorry, Jean, I've used it that much, the pages are a bit ripped, and stick post-it notes and scribbles all over it. And then occasionally it makes its way back to the bookshelf only for it to be pulled back off again because it's...
Okay, can people see me? And I hope they can. It's lovely to be here and thanks ever so much to Abigail for organising this. I'm now going to find my slides. I think you wanted originally this session to be about workload and time management. I'm not an expert on time management, but I do know a bit about what we can do to reduce the demands on your time, and that was a big theme of the book. So the 4th edition, I've got to basically write it in July and August and submit it by the end of August. And I've been talking to a lot of SENCos already, but I absolutely need your help today. So today is collaborative. I'm going to give you some ideas that will be in the new book, which will largely be a rewrite because things have changed so much. But what I'd like you to do is, as we go through, please do put in the chat your good practice or anything. You don't have to feel it's good practice, but don't wait for the end. Just say, we do this or we do that. This is how I manage this. This is how I reduce the workload for myself whilst doing a great job. So please keep that going, and we're going to collate all those ideas, and you will get everybody's ideas, not just mine, and yours will inevitably be better than mine. So please do that. I can't see if you're doing it or not because stupid system, I can't see the chat while I'm chatting, but I know you will be doing it. As I said to Abigail, SENCos are never backwards in coming forwards. They're great people. You have to be to survive. So if you are feeling overwhelmed, you're not alone. You'll have seen the last SENCO workload survey. Most SENCos just don't feel that they can do what they want to do. But the interesting thing is that it seems to be getting worse because the numbers are on SEN support as well as EHCPs have been increasing. You know, the numbers on school-based SEN support sort of dipped around the last iteration of the code, but they've been going up and up and up since then, and every one of them passes your desk, chair, whatever. So you're probably feeling like this, particularly at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I suspect you might be. So what can we do about it? I'm going to be fairly swift, but you can have these slides. I'm sure there's a way that the wonderful Abigail can make that happen. So my 3 key points that I'm going to develop in the next edition of the book is what we've got to do. We've got to put fewer children on the register. We have to distribute responsibility in school to others, and we have to make the best possible use of technology to save our time. So I'm going to start with the issue of who we put on the register. You know, there's no absolute about numbers on the register. I'm going to start on all of these ways. There are 3 different ways of doing it, and I'll come back to each of those points in turn. But remembering that, you know, I meet schools that put loads of children on the register that have lesser needs than a school next door that puts very few on. And it's a lot of the difference is down to the school, not the needs of children. And I'd be interested for you to start putting in the chat what you think are the incentives. What is it that's making you, if you are, what is it that's making you put perhaps more children on the register than you can manage? What are the incentives for that? Just look at that. 40% of summer-born boys are categorised as having SEN at some point in their primary schools. Can you really believe that 40% of summer-born boys actually have SEN? You know, it's probably not true. And this EPI report, Education Policy Institute, produced this data on huge variability. So what we've got to do, move on slides, please. They've stuck. What we've got to do is remember that the code of practice distinguishes between underachieving children and those with SEND, and there are a whole load of underachieving children who we don't have to put on register. And even if you look at the right hand side, even if children do have some sort of diagnosis, you don't actually necessarily have to put them on the register if it doesn't do anything different for them. The other day I was talking to a SEN and disability lead in a multi-academy trust, great trust, and she described her own 3 children. She's got 3 children, all dyslexic, and she said the middle one is not on the SEN register. He uses green paper. He makes sure that his teachers know that he's dyslexic. He makes sure he gets the exam arrangements he needs, though those don't require being on the register either, as you well know. So what she said to me I thought was very interesting. If the pupil, the young person, the child can be independent, can manage their needs independently, then they're doing it. You know, what's the added bonus of creating lots of paperwork about it? Have I got everything there? Yeah. So diagnosis does not necessarily mean you put them on the register. That's the neurodiversity, and that's difficult. You know, I feel tensions about this because one of my big things is that children with speech language communication needs are often not identified. They have a special need and it's not picked up. So, you know, it's really difficult. And I know it's not an easy decision. The next one is about having that range of short-term intervention programs in school. The new government white paper is saying that every child who's fallen behind is going to have, the parents are going to have to be told what intervention they're having. Just imagine, that must not end up as being over to you, the SENCO. It's got to be everybody's job. And there are loads of these interventions. You know, Nelly is happening. Some people I've heard put their children on the register if they're taking part in Nelly in reception. Nelly talk boosts, the I Can talk boosts, one-to-one or small group reading interventions. If, by the way, I'm holding up a book now, I hope you can see it. Oh, you probably can't actually because you're looking at the slides, but I've written another book which is Reaching the Unseen Children, and it's particularly about disadvantage rather than SEN, but it overlaps massively. And in that I've done a new section on the evidence for different interventions. So if you want to refresh your ideas on what literacy interventions actually have evidence behind them and what maths interventions have evidence, do have a look at that book. Social communication interventions like talk about, number stacks, which I've heard great things about. You need to have a lot of these, as many as you can afford, and that will reduce the children who need more help. One great idea I must talk to you about that I got from the wonderful SENCO at a school called Holdsworth Valley, a primary school near me. They do an 8:30 in the morning intervention for half an hour before school with any child who's behind in their learning, and they work with teaching assistants on work that's based on the gaps in their learning that their class teachers have identified, and the children are very happy to come. A secondary school I know, they have a wonderful idea. Instead of a catch-up idea, what they've set up is pre-tutoring. So they run a group after school which is called the Getting Ahead group, and what they do with that group is pre-tutor them for what's coming the next day. And then the biggie is increasing what's normally available in classrooms, both the classrooms, the teaching, and in the school environment, because obviously the better that is, the fewer children who then need something that's additional to or different from. And this is just as simple as teachers routinely putting the subtitles on videos, and then they don't need to specifically write that down as a plan for a child with visual impairment. It's about teachers routinely adapting their seating plans so that a child on the autistic spectrum, you know, might have a particular place that's more comfortable and feels safe for them to sit. So it's about getting people to do things routinely. I'll show you some of the environment stuff that I've seen recently. This is Whitefield Primary in Liverpool. They have small classrooms that run into each other. And so that causes problems. They're really quite cramped and open. They run into each other. So to overcome that, they have emphasised consistency across all the classrooms so that they're predictable for children. And every classroom has the same elements of their display. This is kind of, are we in our comfort zones or our panic zones? There's lots of other structures. They all use this is something called scaling, a lovely technique that was developed for autism. What's the size of the problem? They all use that. No time to talk about it. They all have self-regulation, zones of regulation across the school, not just for children with SEND, but for everybody. And every classroom has a zones of regulation display there. And they also have consistent routines in every classroom. Everybody has the same things on their desk. There's no clutter. Nobody hangs things from ceilings because we know that's really difficult for some children. And they don't, any of them have displays for display's sake. So they reduce the distractions and the sensory overloads as far as they can. Every classroom has a visual timetable for everybody. And, you know, we've always said, haven't we, what's good practice for SEN supports all children, and it really does. Every classroom has a pod of some sort, they're all different, where children can retreat to self-regulate and calm themselves when they need to. So that was Whitefield. This is a lovely example of a consultant called Shahana Knight, works with schools to help them redesign classrooms, and she's done a series of blogs you can find online about how she helped schools develop a therapeutic classroom with calm lighting, flexible seating, that you can sit at tall benches where teachers can be alongside you, and there's lots of natural materials. Have a look at that. So that's the environment. How do we make that, as you know, high quality for everybody? And now, what about classroom teaching? Now, the big change since I wrote the last edition of my Beating Bureaucracy book is, I think, the growth in scientific sort of based teaching strategies for everyone. There are things that we have known for years work for children with SEND that have now become universal for everybody. This is a slide from brilliant Nicola Crossley, SEND expert Nicola Crossley, and she's talking and writing about some of those things that are now part of what early career teachers learn, what particularly in secondary schools and in maths. I don't always find this in individual primary schools, but for example, teachers are increasingly memory is a problem for many children with SEND, but now most classrooms are doing some kind of retrieval practice, or, you know, last lesson we learned this, today we're going to learn this. Vocabulary, massive issue for many children with SEND, but now most teachers are identifying in advance the vocabulary that's going to be needed for a particular unit of work, maybe teaching it, maybe putting it in a knowledge organizer. Visual support, we now have the science of dual coding, where, you know, materials are presented visually as well as in words. And modelling, most teachers now really are into the I do, we do, you do sequence, and modelling for children. All of those things, I think, are reducing, or should be reducing massively, the number of children who need something additional or different. Scaffolding has also become part of what people talk about now. Instead of differentiation, where you used to have your top group, your middle group, and your SEND group, basically, instead of differentiation, you now have the idea we've got to scaffold all students to do the best they can be. And here's just one example of the kind of scaffolds that I would be seeing in classrooms to structure writing. and you see these stuck in students' books. And then another kind of scaffold I'm very keen on is the use of talk frames or writing frames. So you have these on cards, and it scaffolds students' ability to either orally or in writing create more sophisticated structures. Here's another. This is a scaffold from Whitefield again. They've put these starters for children to use in paired partner talk about their work, and you'll see the visual support there: feedback, effort, mistakes, and challenge. I think there's a lot more to do still on the kind of scaffold which is providing alternatives to written recording. Like, I created this chart God knows how many years ago when I worked for the national strategies. It's really old and some of it's happening, kids do get to do posters instead of having to write an essay, but a lot of it doesn't consider. There's still too much writing, and that is really difficult for some children with SEN, not all. So I think we need to work on this, and particularly the assistive technology. It's getting a lot better, but especially since COVID, much more access to Chromebooks, iPads, and all sorts of notebooks and laptops. And the fact that they have inbuilt assistive technology, you can adjust your color, your font size, it'll read it to you, you can dictate to it, it'll write it down, it'll translate. So if we just use the inbuilt technology, we don't need extras. And then what we do need, though, is to get all teachers really comfortable in using it and get kids to know how to use it so that they lead it and they switch on the technology that they need. I think we can also do much more about making learning concrete, which for students who might find learning difficult, particularly those with cognition and learning needs. So we've got the mastery approach, that says you start with something concrete and then you can move to pictorial, and then after that you can go to the symbols, math symbols. I think there's always an extra stage, which is about starting with a real world object or thing. So not just those fractions, but getting kids to cut up a cake first. I think that's an idea that hasn't quite, people think that's concrete, those ones in the middle, but they're not real. And this is a lovely example from trainer and SEND expert Rachel Cosgrove in secondary, where she taught the atomic structure of the elements of the periodic table by having kids make them with Smarties, and then they could eat them afterwards. So lots of real stuff we could, I think, get more in. Visual supports, I think, are getting much more common. This is a lovely one, again quite old, that I saw long ago in a secondary school in London. So they've done some work on developing symbols for every kind of learning. So if children are watching a film clip, wherever they are in the school, in all lessons, they will see on the whiteboard at the start this symbol to show them what they're going to be doing. If there's class discussion, they'll see this hands up one. If there's writing, they'll see that one. Paired work, small group work. And having that, so you've got your objectives at the top, and then you've got the how we will be learning, and you've got the key vocabulary. And that kind of structure really gives predictability and security for young people with attachment or trauma needs or autism or ASD. As a final example of what inclusive first teaching, quality first teaching looks like, the idea of having strategies to help children self-regulate, so zones of regulation, and then somewhere in the school or in the classroom where all children can take themselves to if they need to calm themselves. And I've seen great things, pebbles, smooth pebbles it could be a corner of the classroom, it could be a separate room, smooth pebbles to touch, colouring in, detailed colouring in, a rocking chair to sit in, lavender scented cotton balls with lavender scented to sniff. And someone found an old lava lamp in a jumble sale and put that in their calm corner. Now, this is difficult in secondary. I cannot imagine secondary classrooms with calm corners. So, but they might have some sort of central room. It's just that it quite soon becomes a room, where kids get dumped. So it needs managing. But I think in secondary, the equivalent is teachers having an arrangement with colleagues. So they can say to a student who needs to self-regulate, could you just take this book to Mrs. X, please? So there's an agreed way that they can take 5 minutes and take themselves out. You'll be looking at all this and think, how on earth do leaders get this to happen? How do you help all teachers do this? It's hard. I'm really not saying it's easy. And there's two approaches. There's the carrot, the incentives, or the stick, performance management and accountability, and you have to do this. The carrot is you'll want to do this, and the stick is you must. This is a school where they went more on the carroty side, secondary school, where the SENCO started with one keen faculty, and he didn't tell people what to do to improve their SEN provision. He just acted as a critical friend. The staff discussed a number of questions he gave them and prioritised which one do they really want to look at, and they decided to look at how do I know my curriculum practice is inclusive. And then they did some self-evaluation on that and decided on what CPD they needed. And they went away and researched that themselves. So it's very much about giving ownership to colleagues. It's not saying you have to come to this after school session on Thursday. It's about how can this whole department work with the SENCO simply acting as critical friend. This is more on the firm side. This is where at Whitefield again, where this is the expectation on class teachers in a primary school. So first of all, they do their great quality first inclusive teaching. Then for half a term, they're expected to try additional strategies, try them out, note them down, see what works. If there's still an issue, then they talk to get advice from the SENCO. They just have a chat, and then they implement that for half a term. And then actually, the child wouldn't go on the SEND register until then. This is a school, in fact, that really only puts children on the register when outside agencies are involved. But this is very difficult for the SENCO, and sometimes she will put them on the register just because they might move to another school. And I do appreciate that having a plan in place and being on the register does give you that protection, particularly if there's high mobility or if you're going to secondary school. This is a mixture of carrot and stick at Holdsworth Valley, the school I mentioned earlier. The SENCO does coaching with staff. And coaching is very much, again, owned by the coachee. They're not told what to do, but they look at good practice and then try it out and discuss it. But the SENCO at Holdsworth Valley is also quite tough. And her head teacher, I met her and her head teacher together, and the head teacher said Elizabeth is relentless and she holds people to account. And so it is perhaps a blend. But never be afraid to hold people to account, because the SEND code tells us that this has got to be part of the school's performance management arrangements and part of performance management conversations. To me, I think it's always best if you get to the heart as well as the head. If you get your colleagues in school to understand, subject teachers and class teachers, get them to understand what it feels like to have any sort of difficulty or special educational need. And here's some examples. A fabulous secondary SENCO in Bristol used to, for the incoming year 7, he would go out in the summer term and get them to make, those with SEND, would get them to make a short video about themselves and what they needed, what helped them and what didn't. So one little boy with a hearing impairment, he said on his video, if you turn away from me, so you've got your back to me, I can't hear you. So if you're writing on the board with your back to me, it's no good. And hearing that and then they show these films to the staff who are going to be teaching year 7. And it really gets them inside the child's head and gives them that feeling of wanting to make changes. Another school, I think I read this on Twitter from SENCO Ginny Bootman, who said she ran some training where they invited parents of students with SEN in, and they did a carousel where the staff, teaching staff, went round this carousel talking to a parent about what it was like to be a dyslexic child in school, or what it was like to be a child with autism in school, or speech language communication needs. So they got a real sense of the parent saying, this is what it's like. He comes home exhausted. He tells me this, or she tells me this. Everything you do about person-centered planning is really good for winning hearts as well as mine. Bring the child's view of what it's like from their perspective. There's no better way of getting teachers to do things than have the child tell them what works for them, or to get a member of staff to be part of a meeting where you get a child to talk about what a good day looks like for them and what a bad day looks like for them, and what's working and not working. So we've talked about getting teachers to see what it feels like, and then I think we need to back that up with some really practical help, because people are so busy that, you know, you're terribly busy, but they're terribly busy too. And this is an example from Amjad Ali, who's a SENCO and a senior leader and trainer, and he has a website. And what he did was show all the staff what a reading age, what you can read if you've got a reading age of 10, over 10 years, 6 months. And then he showed them what that same text would look like if you had a reading age between 8 and 9.5. And then what it would look like if you had a reading age below 6 years, 11 months. So no better way of getting to their hearts. After that, he showed them how, if you find something on Google, you can filter your responses by reading level and find texts and resources at the right level. So you back up this is why you should do it, with the practical support, you know, and his staff hadn't known that. Your role, I think, and this is the way to avoid an totally impossible workload. It'll always be impossible, but there's impossible and totally impossible. Your role, I think, is to help other people, not do it for them. That's the key principle in your mind. You're there to help. So ideally you would be there at the stage of planning units of work and the curriculum. You offer surgeries and drop-ins, and you suggest strategies to people. There is an element, though, where suggesting strategies can be too many. I think sometimes SENCos sort of say, well, try this, try this, try that. So in my Beating Bureaucracy book, I have got strategy sheets for each type of need. And what I suggest is you don't give the class or subject teacher the sheet and say, do these things, or read this 5-page document. Instead, you just get a highlighter pen, you take the sheet for, say, physical impairment difficulties or hearing impairment. You highlight no more than 3 strategies. Ideally, you get them to look at the list and choose themselves which 3 they're going to try out. Then the idea is they go away, they try out just those 3, and then they talk to you again about how it went. Another way of avoiding the too many is this idea. Many trusts are now having regular short training for all staff. So this school, the Greenshaw Learning Trust, this trust has fortnightly drop-ins. They're not about SEN, they're about quality first teaching. They're about retrieval practice or modelling or scaffolding. They're about the absolute principles of what makes quality first teaching. But then what teachers do is identify one small step they can take, one actionable step from that fortnightly CPD. So they don't have a huge list of things to do. After that, give people time to talk about what they've done and share their successes, and maybe prizes for trying things out. Distribute responsibility. Right. you shouldn't do everything. I'm not going to say a lot about this, but I'm going to do some real thinking, and I'll be interested in your ideas about how you can give responsibility to the pupils themselves and to peers, to other children and young people. This is a boy in Henley Bank, I think, one school, who said, I don't think our teachers have read my pupil passport for a while. Can you send it out? So he'd noticed that the subject teachers in this big secondary school probably hadn't looked at what they should be doing for him lately. And he went and said that to the SENCO, and she just emailed it round again and said, this student has said he doesn't think you've read it lately. Could you please? So give as much responsibility to pupils, particularly older ones. For the high quality inclusive teaching, that absolutely responsibility lies with class teachers and secondary subject leaders, with you as advisors. Some people having a champion in secondary schools, a SEN champion in each department, can help with that. Then responsibility for the actual paperwork. If you have identified a student with SEND and you do need to do a plan of some sort, whatever you call it, some sort of individual support plan, where does the responsibility go there? Well, I think in primary, the responsibility for those absolutely should be with class teachers. They have a class of 30, within that, it's tough, but they should be the one developing, reviewing, meeting with parents about those plans. With secondary, I think it's much harder, but what I'm meeting mostly is that SENCos have developed teams of HLTAs and TAs who are really expert, and they are able to delegate everything to do with a particular type of need or a particular department to those expert teams of HLTAs and TAs who actually manage the reviews, the papers, and so on. I'd be interested to know in the chat if anybody has managed to delegate this to the level of tutors, form tutors in secondary school, or to heads of year. I've certainly met examples where other leaders are involved. So I talked yesterday to a school where there is one senior leader is the leader for wellbeing. So all the stuff that's to do with SEMH plans and profiles and so on is actually managed by the wellbeing lead. Let's look at primary class teachers. This is Holdsworth Valley, the school I've mentioned before. It's just wonderful. Every child with SEND has a pupil passport. This is what they look like. And they take the form of a big book, a huge book with a laminated cover with the child's name on it. So in each classroom, there's a stack of these big books. It's kept in class. Children know about them. They're involved in creating and updating them every term. And they have the usual person-centered headings like what people like and admire about me, what makes me happy, how I want to be supported. And the how I want to be supported leads to the specific strategies, the time-limited, smarter targets that help children and families achieve their long-term dreams and goals. Now, in this school, the class teacher has a conversation. You'll fall off your chairs, but every half term, the class teacher will have a conversation about this plan. In the second half of every term, the class teacher does a review sheet on the goals and rates whether the child has met, partly met or not met those particular short-term goals, and then the SENCO gathers that data so she can use that for her data to monitor the percentage achieving their goals. And every half term, so this cycle goes on, half term, they develop revise the plan at the beginning of the term, class teacher reviews it in the second half, and every half term the teachers submit their big books, their profiles, to the SENCO, and she will comment on them and suggest maybe change the targets or make them smarter or try a different strategy. And then, this is the tough bit, staff have 1 week to make the change in the plan. And this is where it's Elizabeth again, and the teacher says she's fierce on that, and they do it. At secondary school, Henley Bank, this is the example of delegation to an expert SEND team. So she has this team of HLTAs and TAs. And so she was able to split up the meetings across her team. And the members of the team will write student passports together with young people and parents. And they contain the key information that class subject teachers need to see. So delegation, distributed responsibility. Please put your ideas in the chat. I hope that they're coming now. Please start to put it now. How do you distribute responsibility in your school? And the last of my takeaways, and I am going to stop very shortly, is about technology. Now, this is the other huge change since the last edition of my book, is that most people are using technology like EduKeys and other systems to record their plans and their data and so on. And that makes a huge, huge difference to both your recording, your communication of provision, and your evaluation of provision. This is Henley Bank at secondary school again, and they use EduKey. So just have a look at this. I won't read it to you. So she doesn't have to enter much into the provision map, and she can easily and quickly pull off whatever she needs to report to governors or whatever. I'm hoping to learn more. I'm going to be talking to some of you who've already volunteered via Abigail, that you'll talk to me about your schools, about particularly interested in different IT systems that you use. I'm just going to finish, if my slides would let me. Oh, why have you got stuck, you stupid thing? I want to finish with something about Ofsted, because I just want you to remember, you don't need to worry. Still not moving on. Inspectors won't ask to see case studies or provision maps or data. What they'll look at is what is happening in classrooms. So they'll be looking at inclusive quality first teaching. They need you to be able to tell them what's working and have the data and evidence to prove it. They want to know what children and parents' experiences, and they will look at the school development plan and so on, self-evaluation to make sure that SEND is embedded across the school. So those are all good messages. And in the 4th edition of my book, I'm going to update. I did a model policy for Ofsted in the last one. I'm going to update a model policy that describes, you know, we focus on inclusive quality first teaching. This is what we provide. This is our universal offer. This is what we do afterwards. And this is why we don't have loads of bits of paper circulating around.
All right, so thank you to everybody for joining us this afternoon. Jean, if you come up with any questions you'd like us to ask within the group, we'd be more than happy to post those for you. We do it on the form, and then I'll just send you the spreadsheet with the answers. That's the easiest way. If anybody has got anything else that they want to ask, if you would like to direct message Gavin, who is in the group, well, you will know who Gavin is, he's my husband, and he will make sure that those questions get forwarded to myself and to Jean. Please don't direct message me though, because my direct messages get jammed up all of the time, over 100 a day, and you will get lost. Sorry, just being honest. Thank you, Jean, for your time this afternoon. It's been absolutely wonderful to talk to you and to listen to you. I'm hoping everybody's got a little bit from this afternoon. Copy of the PowerPoint, Rachel, I will sort that out with Jean in a moment. Yes. And we'll sort out how we're going to share that with you via the group. So we will let everybody disappear. Go and have your dinners, go and have a bit of a break. It's a long weekend, don't forget it is bank holiday on Monday, as I didn't realise till earlier. Okay, lovely. So Jean, if you just want to stay on for a couple of seconds, and we'll let everybody else leave.
Bye everybody, it's been really inspirational for me to have to converse with you.
Thank you, Jean.